Hey there, good morning. Welcome to the JeepSolid Garage. Today we're doing a quick brake job on my 2012 Jeep Wrangler JK. Just jacking it up, getting it on a jack stand here real quick. And we're gonna buzz the tire off real quick. If you don't have an impact driver, you need to leave the vehicle on the ground while you break the lug nuts loose. But with this handy dandy impact driver, this will just buzz them right out. Now I do like to throw down a little piece of cardboard and a little catch pan here because we're going to use some brake cleaner as well. And I've got the vehicle safely on a jack stand on the axle there. I like to throw the spare tire underneath as well, just as added protection. The wheels are chalked. Don't let your vehicle fall on you and crush you. And if we inspect the brake pad material, you can see the pads are getting down very thin. So it's that little tiny space right there at the tip of my finger. There's, what, about 3 millimeters of pad left on that side. And through the window on the back side here, you can see there's just a few millimeters of pad left. So if I can do this right in that little gap, right at my fingernail there. That little gap there, there's just a couple of millimeters of pad left, so these are definitely due. My rotors are still in good shape. They're not grooved, no roughness in them. If your rotors are damaged or cracked or have deep grooves in them, you need to replace your rotors as well. But here we're just replacing our brake pads because everything else looks good. There's 2 caliper pins, one on the top here, one on the bottom. 15 millimeter, we're gonna loosen those. And it might spin on you, so you gotta get another narrow wrench on here to hold the pin. And if you can, I highly recommend doing your own repairs. Start small with something like an oil change or even brakes. It's actually kind of fairly easy, and learn from there. I have saved tens of thousands of dollars over the years doing my own repairs. And one thing that'll really help is get yourself a diagnostic computer. So when your car throws that check engine code, you got a computer to hook up to it and it'll tell you exactly what's wrong. And that actually brings us to today's channel sponsor. This is the SC880 scan tool. It'll hook up to your OBD2, scan, tell you what's wrong with it, and do code resets as well. Let's hook it up real quick and show you guys how it works. I'm just gonna plug it into the OBD2 under the dash and turn the ignition on. Not gonna start the vehicle. And it brings up our display here, history, auto VIN. Hopefully you guys can see this. Let's go to our OBD2. Do that. Let's do a quick auto scan. And no codes found. Everything looks good there. So super easy tools to use, and you can gain a ton of information from these little code readers. They have helped me with diagnostics in the past many times. Oh, what was the last thing I did? I think it helped to identify some bad cylinders on my vehicle. Told me it was like what, cylinder 1, and it turned out to be the coil that was bad. So if you don't have a code reader, yeah, highly recommend picking one up. Very useful tool, especially when you're doing your own home auto mechanics. This one here, I'll link in the description below so you can find it, an Amazon link for you. Let's get the other caliper pin out here. Now I want to push this whole caliper over a little bit so I can get this off easier. So this is vented, so there's these slots in the middle. You don't want to put your screwdriver like on the face of the rotor, you can damage it. So we're just going to put that on there, kind of pull on it a little bit here. Try to squeeze it over this way a little bit. That should be enough to break it loose. And then our caliper will just slide off here. You don't want to let it hang from the brake line there. I'm just going to set it up here out of the way. And our brake pads will slide off. And here's our new front brake pads. Extreme, Power Stop, Severe Duty Truck, and Tow brake pads. You don't really want to go cheap on your brakes, at least I don't like to. There's instructions here for a whole break-in procedure. It only takes like 5 minutes, but you got to break these pads in properly. We've got our new clips there. our grease and our pads. And you'll notice the little clips. These are different. There's like an inside and outside clip, so pay attention to that. There's like those little tabs that hang off on the ends. And the brake pads themselves, there's an inner pad and outer pad. This has the little squealer on it right there, so we're going to pay attention to where that goes. Next, we're going to pull these little clips off. And we're paying attention to how these went on there. The flatter backside is against the backside there. There's 2 on the outside and 2 on the inside here. I'm going to use a little wire brush, just clean up the surface here where those clips were. And a little bit of brake cleaner before we put on our new grease. I was looking for a little brush to put my grease on with, but couldn't find one, so I'm going to use a Q-tip here. And yeah, we're putting grease on underneath where these little tabs go. This just helps prevent rust, but also squealing. Just so that the little tabs don't make noise here. Don't get grease onto the rotor. Be very careful. Q-tips aren't my favorite thing to use, but it works. It does come with that grease packet, but honestly there's never enough in it, so I'm using a little bit of my own grease here. And that's why Q-tips aren't my favorite, because they start coming apart on you pretty quick. Q-tips don't like grease. And with that done, let's start putting these little clips on so that taller flat part goes towards the back. And this little S part will go on the outside, so taller part towards the back, this little S part, little tiny tab on the front. So it'll go in, this one will go here. This one, so yeah, that smaller tab on the inside there, flat part towards the back, just kind of makes sense there. So you have a inside and outside, so you just gotta make sure you get it right. Now I'm gonna use a little bit of the provided grease on top of these little clips we installed. Just a little bit to cover the surface. You don't need to get carried away with it. And don't get any on the rotor again. Now I can do the same thing to our brake pads. The part of the pad that's gonna contact the surface on those little tabs. We're gonna just put a little bit of grease on there as well. We're paying attention to not touch the surface of the pad or the surface of the rotor. We don't want oils from our hands getting on there, grease from our hands. Our hands are getting pretty dirty here. I'm going to keep those braking surfaces nice and clean. Now we matched the pad up to the one we took off. We know this one goes on the outside here. Sometimes it can be a little tricky to get them wedged into these new clips. This one I think is going to go fairly easy though. Yep. And the inside one, so this one has a little squealer on it, and it matches up to our old one we took off. Look at that, there's just in time. There's only a couple millimeters of pad left on that one. So same thing, we're going to grease up these 2 spots on this pad. Another thing we greased up is the back side of the pad here, where the piston there, the caliper, is going to push on it right there. We want a little bit of grease there, kind of mess up their emblem a little bit. Now let's pull these caliper pins out. We're going to clean them up, get them re-greased, check the boots, make sure there's no cracks in the boots. Take the boot all the way off here. Clean up our caliper pin and re-grease it. Now let's inspect the caliper here. Just wipe off any gunk on the piston here. Looking for any tears or cracks in the boot. It looks good. We're going to compress the caliper there, because see how far it's pushed out? We have much thicker pads on now, so this piston has to go way in. We're going to compress that and then get a little bit of grease on the surface of it as well. Let's see if I can compress it with my channel locks here. Otherwise I gotta get out my big clamp. Let's see if my C-clamp will do the job here. This is the part of where if you don't have the right tools or big enough tools, you get to, the money you save on doing your own repair, you get to invest in new parts or new tools. And doing a brake job like this, gosh, I'm saving, what, $400 or $500? I could buy, you know, $400 or $500 worth of new tools. I don't know if the wife will go for that. Make sure I'm not pushing on the brake line on the back there. It's actually on the bracket on the back. And we'll compress this. And as we're compressing that, it's forcing fluid back up into the fluid reservoir. So we're also going to check the fluid reservoir and make sure it's not overflowing. If it's low on brake fluid, we'll add a little bit of brake fluid to it. Get a little bit of grease on the piston here. And a little bit on these two tabs right here on this side. And drop the caliper back down in place. Making sure we're not getting the brake line twisted up or anything. The ABS sensors, be careful of that as well. Make sure it's still hooked up. So just slide right on. Push our caliper pins in a little bit. And get our caliper bolts threaded back in. We're going to tighten these down and torque them. This is a 2012 JK. The torque specs for it are 26 inch-pounds, or sorry, 26 foot-pounds. Not inch-pounds, 26. Top and bottom. We're going to put the wheel back on. Very important to remember, you're not going to have any brakes when you initially get in and push on that brake paddle. It's going to just go swoosh because your pads, your caliper is not compressed against those pads tightly. It's not seated. So get in and pump your brakes a few times when you're done before you start it up and try to drive away. The other thing we're going to check here, set you guys down, we're going to check the brake fluid reservoir. Make sure it's not overflowing. Over here, should say on it here, it takes a dot something. .3. You got a minimum, maximum. We're still okay there. I don't want to take the cap off right now. We're supposed to blow it off with some air. Maybe I'll take a rag and wipe it off before I open it up. Looks like I'm okay right now though. This code reader, super handy tool, and the new brake pads, extreme brake pads. I like these. Good high performance brake pad. All of that will be linked in the description below for you guys to find it. Some nice Amazon links there. Thank you guys so much for following, and check out my next video. And a couple other tips, if I didn't mention, you have to do both sides, passenger and driver's side at the same time. You can't do just one side. And did I mention about doing the break-in procedure? The pads, they come with a break-in procedure of accelerating, hitting, like hard braking so many times in a row. It only takes a few minutes. I think I did mention that earlier, didn't I? But thanks for watching.